I grew up lucky, but I didn't know it for a long time. I didn't know the depths of how lucky I have been in my life until I got much older. And as a matter of fact, I still am discovering new ways in which I have been lucky. One of the ways in which I was lucky was to grow up in a family, to be born into a family that remained intact throughout the 1970s, 80s, and is still today. I grew up in a relatively small city in East Texas, and my grandparents lived in that same city. And they lived well until I was in adulthood. I was surrounded by positive role models, and what wasn't positive about them, I was shielded by my family. I was the oldest grandson, born into both sides of the family, and neither side of the family had a lot of grandkids, and that came with all kinds of privileges, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And as a white middle-class male growing up in the United States of America, fewer barriers were put in my way, if any, to be successful, to replicate the middle-class success of my parents than most people. And in all those ways, I have been lucky and privileged. And I still struggle with figuring out and avoiding allowing the privileged ideas that I grew up with that became a part of me thanks to society. I still struggle to get rid of those things. Not that my family is responsible for that. My family, I promise you, made it clear that what I was getting from them was a gift given with love, but a gift that was not an entitlement. Society told me different. I still struggle with overcoming those societal privileges and privileged thinking that became a part of me when I was growing up. As a matter of fact, I made a mistake in this area where my privilege revealed itself just recently, much to my embarrassment. But one of the ways in which I've known I was lucky for a really long period of time was I was lucky to be surrounded by, raised by, in contact with some extraordinary women. For Women's History Month, I thought I would talk about my history with women as I was growing up and through today. And here I'm going to be talking about women who are part of my family. I'm not meaning to imply that in any way it was the job of these women to raise me and to teach me these things. But they taught me by the way they lived their lives, by the things they did, by the things they held important. Those things are lessons that I learned from them and that I still learn from them. So I want to begin with my two grandmothers. One of them, my grandmothers, we referred to as Granny. My Granny was the youngest child of an older couple who had many children. As a matter of fact, by the time my Granny was born, I want to say in 1910, she had siblings who had grown up and moved away and had kids of their own. She grew up then kind of way out in the country, way back literally in the sticks, in a farming home where she had to walk at least a half a mile to get to the road to catch the bus that would take her to the elementary school in her local community where she went. When she got to be high school age, though, that community didn't have a high school. She wanted to continue her education and become a teacher like her older brother, who was just one sibling older than her. So every Sunday during the school year, she rode a mule into town where she stayed at a boarding house so she could go to the high school in the city where I grew up, in the same high school I went to, though not the same building. And then every Saturday, she got on the mule and rode back home to spend part of the weekend with her mother and father. She was that dedicated to the idea of getting an education. After high school, she went on to attend Stephen F. Austin State University, a special teacher program, which was 1 year, and she then became a teacher. She later went back and completed a four-year degree, I believe. But she became a teacher, and she was a high school English teacher in the small community where she lived and where she'd grown up for decades. That teaching was a large part of who she was. She loved books. She loved reading. Her house had shelves covered with all kinds of books. In 1939, after she'd been teaching for a while, she and another teacher friend of hers decided they wanted to go to the 1939 World's Fair in New York City. So they hopped a train and they went by themselves, two single women, in the late 1930s, to go to the 1939 World's Fair. she did all this before she got married. She married relatively late in life for the time period in which she grew up. I believe she was 30 by the time she got married. And then she had 3 kids, my mother and my 2 uncles. She was an incredibly opinionated, sharp-tongued, no-filtered, absolutely fearless woman who could, fried chicken and canned green beans and make and preserve jelly and essentially rip you a new one or let you know exactly what you were doing wrong anytime she felt like it. One of the great delights of my life was spending time with my granny, who looked out for me when my mom was at work, when my mom went back to work, and getting to eat all of the delicious food that she would make for me. My father's mother, we referred to as Grandma, and she was certainly a very different person from my granny. She was raised in Houston. She married my grandfather before World War II began, and then lived in the Houston area during World War II while he worked at a gun plant operating a crane. After the war, she moved back to the small city in Texas where I grew up and where my family lived, where she was surrounded by my grandfather's 5 sisters. So she had 5 sister-in-laws who were pretty much almost always in her business, and I'm relatively sure didn't like the way she did things. She survived that, managed to stand up for herself, managed to to find her way and to fit in with a family that was probably very different. I know was very different from her. She struggled with her mental health, but she found a way through to overcome that, to live a long and productive life. She worked, which was unusual. In the 40s and 50s, even when I was, I think, up through about the 5th grade, she worked for the Social Security Administration. I think I was the only kid I knew who had a grandmother who worked, who was a middle-class kid I knew who had a grandmother who worked. She could dive into a swimming pool without getting her hair wet. She was a model of patience and grace and quiet strength, and embodied a true spirit of giving, a giving spirit, a giving heart. And she was, in her own way, an extraordinary person, and also, by the way, a great cook. If you haven't figured out how some of these extraordinary women influenced my life yet, at least you should be able to, trace my relatively pudginess to my enjoyment of good food created by my grandmothers and my mother. My mother grew up with my granny, that sharp-tongued, opinionated, accomplished, independent-minded woman. Grew up in a really small house with her 2 brothers, her grandmother, and her parents. That house for a while got its water from a well. They didn't have indoor plumbing for a while when my mom was growing up, so they literally had an outhouse. She graduated at the top of her high school class and near the top of her college class as well. She, when she graduated, she became a teacher and committed to teaching. She also became a high school English teacher, much like her mother. Politically active, outspoken like her mother, not a lot of back down. When I was in grade school, she went back to college and got her master's degree. She had a real love of the works of Mark Twain. She's a lifelong reader, a lifelong educator, a writer, an incredible cook. She knows learned all the same skills as my grandmother. One of my fondest memories of growing up is sitting on a stool and watching my mother prepare dinner every day and having a conversation with her. By the way, my mother also raised my sister, who also is an educator, a teacher, and a feminist, and incredibly politically active. Again, sharp-tongued, no back down, definite, incredible strength of character, and she is raising 2 talented and extraordinary daughters to be exactly the same kind of person she is. And to not take any nonsense from anybody. She has covered for me my entire life. I cannot imagine all the situations. She saved me from being in trouble, from forgetting to buy somebody in our family a birthday gift, or remembering it was somebody's birthday, to not telling on me when she caught me sneaking in the windows of my bedroom after I had been out at night when I shouldn't have been. And that brings me then to my wife. My wife did not grow up in the same lucky circumstances in terms of her family life. as I did. She, as a relatively young person, she began to have to help raise and shield her two younger siblings from what was going on in her family. We met because her family moved around quite frequently because of her father's job. She put herself through college by working incredibly long hours and almost every single day without very much help with almost no help from her parents, and with a little help I could provide her after I graduated from college and got a job. She was a teacher for years. She got involved in school technology. She's now a school principal, and she makes it her job to know every student on her campus and to let every single student know on her campus that they are cared for, that they have a place, that she values them, that she wants them to be successful. I cannot imagine how many thousands of lives she's touched positively, but I can tell you, because I ended up teaching with some of my wife's former students, how much of a difference that she made in their lives. She is a fearless defender of her students, of her faculty. She knows about and defends and takes action to benefit her kids who are in situations that are almost unimaginable, and she deals with that on every single day she's at work. She deals with that. She is strong. She is committed. She is kind, she is caring, she is unflinchingly compassionate, and I admire her a tremendous amount, and I have learned so much from her by being married to her. The only lapse in judgment she had was in marrying me, and you know, she thankfully has been here to raise our daughter, who is courageous and kind and compassionate and outgoing and fun and really just gets a tremendous amount of joy out of life, and who is a person of tremendous faith. And all these women, whether grandmothers, mothers, wife, sister, daughter, all these women have taught me so much, and all of them play such an important role in the person, for all of, you know, the person that I have become and the person I am. The flaws I have, which are many, are not their responsibility. The ideas I have, the beliefs I have, the desire to be better that I have, I hope, I owe to them in large part. And so I just wanted to make this video because it is Women's History Month to, you know, pay tribute to the women in my history who have done so much, not just for me, but have done so much as examples of strength, of leadership, of independence, of compassion, of commitment, of hard work, to pay tribute to them, because you know, the people in our lives are as important a part of history as historical figures who are known, you know, across the country and throughout the world. Anyway, there you go. Look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.